Hello and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, 4 days to the governorship elections, and the electoral umpire insists on the use of the card reader for the exercise. Oba of Lagos, His Royal Majesty Oba Rilwan Akiolu, threatens Igbo voters over his preferred candidate. Udidi community in Delta State cries out for help following oil spill. And Kenya fighter jets raid positions of militant Islamist Al-Shabaab in neighboring Somalia.
On Business News tonight, financial markets across the country reopen tomorrow after the Easter holidays.
And on sports news, Nigeria's table tennis stars call for more support for the sport as Nigeria celebrates World Table Tennis Day.
It's 4 days to the governorship and state assembly elections, and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has mandated that card readers be used for the polls on Saturday. The commission said in a statement through its secretary, Mrs. Augusta Ogaku, that should the card reader fail and the commission unable to replace them within a specified time, the election in such areas would be rescheduled to the next day. The Commission says the rule is in compliance with the guidelines for the 2015 general elections, which it plans to implement for the April 11th polls. The Commission, however, says the relaxation of the guideline on March 28th was only for the presidential and National Assembly elections, but it has reviewed the operation of the card reader, identified the challenges, and has taken adequate measures to address them. The card reader, which was introduced into the Nigerian elections for the first time, failed to work in several parts of the country, which led to the directive by INEC that officials resort to manual accreditation. Meanwhile, INEC's resident electoral commissioner for Edo State, Mr. Mike Igini, has warned of dire consequences for electoral officials who engaged in malpractice in any form in the just concluded presidential elections. Mr. Igini, who was addressing INEC management staff today in the state capital, Benin City, wondered why result sheets would be absent from polling units even after they were personally distributed by him to the electoral officers.
The first segment of the 2015 general election was deemed successful by many, but for the electoral officers, a review of the exercise is necessary, hence this meeting. The mood and tone of the resident electoral commissioner keep the gathering at the edge of their seats, and then the words that poured out show the conduct of some officials was far from impressive. Although Igini acknowledges that there were cases where the card readers became unresponsive, it was clear he did not see that as the reason for the failure to follow laid-down rules.
Surely there will be consequences. There must be an account why the result sheets were not in those polling units at those times, because when I distributed material here, I gave both ballot paper and result sheet at the same time. I did not withhold anything. I gave everything out, just as the national chairman, the national commissioner brought same to the state. I gave everything to all of you. It's also expected that in the process, that same procedure, our practice and procedure must be followed strictly by ensuring that those ballot papers, the result sheets, will also must be given to the supervising presiding officer, who also in turn must present same to the presiding officer, and they must be seen at the polling unit on election day. While in some isolated places it was a contrary situation, surely that is a clear, manifest, violent violation of our practice and procedure, and there will be consequences for that.
Concerning the forthcoming House of Assembly polls, the resident electoral commissioner clarifies whatever misunderstanding there could be about the strict use of the card readers. He did not fail to dish out warnings about the huge consequences for electoral malpractice at any stage of the 2015 polls.
I've said over and again, you have your family names to protect. I understand that names don't matter anymore. Regrettably, our value is upside down. Honesty, dishonesty is on the top. And that is why people don't feel that name matters anymore. But for some of us, our name matters a lot. In fact, our name is everything to us in life.
The Edo Rec reiterates his firm belief that the people and not individuals should determine the outcome of the polls, and Saturday will prove if that will be actualized.
I'm now being joined on the news at 10 via Skype from Abuja by the Chief Press Secretary to the INEC Chairman, Mr. Kayode Idowu. Mr. Idowu, thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Thanks for having me on your program. Good evening.
So in a 5-paragraph statement from INEC today, INEC did say that the Commission has reviewed the operation of the card reader in the March 28th elections and identified the challenges, and has also taken adequate measures to address them. What are the measures that INEC has taken to address some of the problems encountered on March 28th for the presidential elections?
Thanks, Amarachi, for having me on your program. Yeah, the statement that has been issued is to the effect that the supplementary guideline that was issued on March 28th was intended for March 28th alone, meaning that the guidelines that were drawn up and published prior to the elections subsist. And what that provides for is that where there is a challenge with the card reader will be replaced. And if for whatever reason the card reader cannot be replaced, it's a very remote chance. But if that happens, then the elections will hold the next day. Now, the challenges that have been identified that accounted for the what we saw on March 28th included the fact that a particular network provider, the SIM card that we used, ought to have been activated by phones before they were inserted in card readers. And now we have identified that. The Commission has given instruction that every card of that network that will be used in the card reader must be activated first by a phone before they are put in the card reader. There are also very slight things like the cellophane on top of the fingerprint scanner that were left intact there, whereas they ought to have been removed. That also constituted a hindrance to the functioning of the card reader. And of course, the handling generally by some of the ad hoc staff has also been identified, and that also has been addressed. So with all these things in place, the Commission believes that we're home and dry, and we should be able to use the card readers very well on April 11th.
Ms. Taido, I believe we should take it one after the other. You did talk about ad hoc staff, you said, that have been trained. About that, there were some areas that either the ad hoc staff did not know how to operate the card readers. We understand INEC gave them a short period of time, to get used to the card reader because they didn't want people to duplicate the machine and probably be able to manipulate it on election day. But wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it save time, if you actually did the accreditation manually, as you did during the presidential elections, and people can, move on, and then the electoral process goes on really smoothly, instead of encountering these same problems again on election day?
And now, you see, on March 28th, the card reader worked in a substantial number. As a matter of fact, in most of the polling units, the card reader worked. Where you had the failing of card readers was in about barely 1% of the 155,000 voting points that we have. Yes, of course, some of these voting points are high-profile voting points, which made it so visible. but it worked in other areas. And now the commission has given a directive to the states that everybody who handles the card reader must be the trained staff. But in addition to that, there will be a technical support staff on hand that will be deployed. In addition to those that already existed in the states, more technical staff will be deployed from the headquarters, and they will be available such that if there are emergent challenges, they will be readily addressed on the field. And so we are very optimistic that you will not have the kind of challenge that we had on March 28th, on April 11th.
And another problem was also, either the absence, of INEC staff at polling units, as well as the late arrival of INEC staff in some places. I know I got reports of people saying there were no INEC staff in some polling units. Has INEC looked into, proper transportation for its staff to the various polling units on time so that elections can begin at the time that they're supposed to begin, and then they end at the time they're supposed to end, and then we avoid problems of a spillover of elections to Sunday?
Absolutely. Now maybe I should give you a broad overview. You see, on April 2nd, that is following March 28th, the commission met and identified about 6 broad areas where some challenges were noticed on March 28th and where actions are being taken to make sure that those challenges do not arise. One of the broad areas is the full activation of what we call the RACs. That is the registration area centers. Now, the RACs are, in simple terms, the overnight camp where men and material are to stay overnight and move on to the polling units early on election day. In many cases, the RACs were not functional on March 28th for the March 28th elections. Now, the commissioner has given a directive that they should be fully functional in readiness for April 11. The commissioner has also informed the RECs that they should fine-tune the agreement with transporters such that the challenges of transportation that we had on March 28th will not be there. So, all in all, we expect that you will not have the kind of delays that we had on March 28th.
And we'll keep hoping, that we don't encounter these problems on Saturday. Thank you so much, Mr. Kayode Idowu, for joining us on the News at 10 to explain some of INEC's improvements for the next general elections. Mr. Kayode Idowu is the Chief Press Secretary to the INEC Chairman, Ms. Professor Tahiro Jega. In part 2, after the break, Oba of Lagos threatens Igbo voters over his preferred candidate. Please join us again.